Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So once again, Jose Perez is the director of Star Wars Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, and a supervisor of creative development and experience design at ILMxLAB, where he creates groundbreaking virtual reality projects across a number of world-class intellectual properties. And Ronman Ying is the Department Supervisor of Lighting for ILMxLAB, Lucasfilm's immersive storytelling studio. He was the lead lighting TD on Tales from the Galaxy's Edge, as well as a number of other real-time VR projects. Now, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, I got to participate in a press junket for the promotion of Tales from the Galaxy's Edge Enhanced Edition going to the PlayStation VR2 platform. And so today, as part of the conversation with Jose and Ronman, I got to ask them about how they translated the experience of being a Jedi into virtual reality, and about how they knew, like the moment that they knew they were onto something spectacular in Galaxy's Edge in the development as they were testing it out. And we also talked about the High Republic and about creating an experience that is like Star Wars, but also very different considering the different era. So without further ado, let's dive into the second half of my conversation with Jose Perez and Ronman Ying from ILMxLAB.
So, Ronman, you actually mentioned something I wanted to ask about in specific, which was just the experience of being a Jedi in the virtual reality space. And that one is, I would imagine, a particularly challenging one because it's a different kind of haptic experience, I would imagine. I mean, you're doing things that, as opposed to a blaster bolt that, comes out of your hand, like, you stick out your hand and things happen. So how do you make that translate in an effective, like emotionally impactful way in VR?
Well, I think, Jose could probably speak about this too, because he works so closely with our designers in terms of building that interactive experience. I think, obviously a lightsaber is a little more intuitive because, we're holding something, and but I think the force power, I think when I play through the experience, what it reminds me of is humility. It's like, oh, maybe I'm not, like, maybe I need to like be a better Jedi to have stronger force powers, because there are times when I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm really getting this right. Ooh, maybe it's my personal failings as a Jedi. So
Wow.
it's a really interesting connection for me, just playing through that story. But anyways, I'll leave it to Jose to talk about the more Jedi stuff.
Yeah, I think I don't know that there's much more about Jedi-ness than, humility, honestly. I think you kind of hit it pretty good right off the bat. But yeah, I mean, story-wise, it was about all the themes are there. It's about balance and patience and all of these, and growth, and all of these things that are in there as you watch as it's going. And so I felt really good about the Jedi themes of that. As far as the actual controls and the haptics, a lot of it has to do with audio, and we'd learned a lot on Vader Immortal working on the lightsaber dojo. And so this is like, again, childhood fantasy stuff. When you light it up, you feel it go, you kind of feel the energy of it go through the blade, and then it pulses a little bit while you're holding it. And as you're striking things, you'll get kind of bumps in the haptic. So you literally can feel this like energy inside of it as you move it around. And that was really important. And the same thing with the Force is like, we tried our best to not do a lot of like, there's a bunch of blue arrows pointing at the thing you need to pick up. We tried to not do a lot of that stuff. Sometimes you have to make some conceits to make sure people know how to do it the first time. But we tried to rely more on things like haptics and audio and really slight subtle cues. So when you're using the Force and moving your hand around, we'll vibrate, we'll give you a slight bit of haptics, and you can kind of feel it when you pick it up. We rumble it more. And so really leaning into like, what is that, that fantasy of what it feels like to pick up something with your mind, essentially. And I think we're close. I'm not sure yet, but
no, I think it's fantastic. And I would love to ask you for, from that perspective as well, as you were developing Galaxy's Edge, what was the moment for you? Because I'm sure you both individually were playing it for all intents and purposes as it was in development. What was the moment for each of you where you were in the experience and testing it out, and suddenly had that first moment of, this is it. Like, we've got it. Like, we're on to it here.
I'll let Raman go first.
Well, for me, I think our sort of proving ground was really the cantina. So that was really where we did a lot of our visual testing, but also where we did our, we first met Cecil as well. And so for me, it was really seeing, being in VR, being at that bar, having Cecil come and talk to you and realizing, wow, he's big. And then he's got, so it's the immersion of that experience made me think like, oh yeah, this is when VR works, it's like this. It's really, and having a space that we could sort of do more of the material polish so that things had more reality to them really helped play it out. So
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moments for me that were magical. Along blasters start showing up, and stormtroopers are there, and the characters start showing up in the cantina. For me though, it was really all of a sudden, we get a call and Frank Oz is joining the cast, and it's like, what's going on? And then next thing I know, I'm in a call and we're directing Frank Oz as Yoda, and he's like amazing, and every line is becomes a 30-minute conversation, and it's beautiful. And then I'm playing the experience and Yoda's there, and I can't help it, like you can't, and this is, I don't mean this in a cheesy way, it's he's a little guy too, so you want to get eye to eye, but you kneel down. It shows up and you're like, oh hey, and you get down there and you're face to face. And that, to me, growing up with that stuff, was like, okay, we actually are doing something pretty cool here. And the story that we're telling is like a story that I think we really tried to have some meaning and some morality in this concept of found family and what it really means to be a Jedi, which isn't running around just chopping stuff up, And so I got really excited that like we're that's why Frank joined, it's because we're telling the right type of stories here. And so for me, that was like, oh man, like how did we get here?
Yeah, I don't want to do too much spoiler alert, but when we were in the second part, when we're in the First Order facility and dressing up as a stormtrooper and being able to not be recognized because I'm in a stormtrooper outfit was pretty amazing. I was like, wait, they don't know who I am. Ooh, this is great. This is fun. Let's do this. So
Bobby had some hysterical lines in there too. Yeah.
I have one other question for you, and it's related to actually the audio experience that you mentioned, but it's also about the High Republic in specific. I had a chance to talk with Nick Martorelli, who's an executive producer at Penguin Random House Audio, and he talked about how when they were creating the audiobook experiences for the High Republic, how they had to create an entirely different audioscape that would be similar to Star Wars, so you'd still know it was Star Wars, but also convey that you were in a different era of Star Wars. And I wanted to ask you about the High Republic elements of Tales from the Galaxy's Edge. What did you have to do, or were there particular things that you had to consider to make it like Star Wars, but also like its own era?
Absolutely, right? I mean, it's not the prequels, it's before that. And so we wanted to have there's a whole sense of kind of regalness about all of it. And we worked with Joe Trapanese, who has, kind of wrote the High Republic kind of main title through this and everything. So getting music that hints at those larger Star Wars themes, but has its own unique look to it. And so the audioscape completely was like that. And in addition, kind of to your point, one of our voices, even Master Silwyn, who's one of the characters that deals with Adi Sanzi, is actually the same voice from the audiobook. We literally got the same actor and had him come through to record it. So when you talk about connectivity, we're thinking about it. We want it to be real. I love it when the fantasy doesn't get broken, and you're like, oh, this really is all one big story that's going on here. So.
Yeah, I think from an art point of view, it definitely was when we knew we were telling the story elements in the High Republic, it became sort of understanding what that language was. What do Jedi temples look like at that time, and what kind of, it's a different art aesthetic, but obviously we're informed by the Jedi Knights in the Star Wars Council, so we definitely knew what we were going after. But it was exciting to sort of revisit or to visit a different time.
And lots of gold. There's the other top secret. Gold everywhere. It's very golden.
That's wonderful. Jose Ronman, I'm so grateful for your time today. And I just want to ask, if people want to keep up with what either of you are doing online or what ILMxLAB is doing online, where should they go looking for you?
Ronman?
Well, I think our communication team keeps everything up to date with what we're working on at ILMxLAB. And I think I'm sure we're on all the social platforms, but yeah, they definitely tell me what I'm doing, so that's important.
I'd go to ILMxLAB.com or look up ILMxLAB in your local search engine and go from there.
Awesome.
On almost everything. Yeah.
And I'll make sure I link to that in the blog post for the show's episode at sw7x7.com and in the show notes as well. Ronman, Jose, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Congratulations in advance on the enhanced edition coming out later this month. And best of luck to you on future projects.
Thanks, everything, Alan.
Thank you. Peace.
Take care.
And there you go. That is my conversation with Ronman Ng and Jose Perez III from ILMxLAB, and that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the force be with them. All original content is copyright 2021 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.